Hi, I'm Zed.
Hi, I'm P.
Welcome to the Not Your Typical Sister podcast. We're two brown girls trying to open the conversation and share our experiences on taboo subjects.
We're not experts or doctors, so we recommend speaking to a professional if you need help or advice. So grab a cuppa, sit back and enjoy the podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Not Your Typical Sister. How are you, Zed?
I'm good, thank you. And how are you?
I am okay. I am recovering. I basically got COVID, so I am sorry about my voice, listeners, because you might hear some coughing and spluttering as well, but I'm apologizing in advance. But yes, I'm feeling much better. How are you? How's your week been?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're not well, but glad that you're recovering. My week's been good. I just had this sort of stressful presentation this morning, and had a 10-minute slot or 5-minute slot. And before you have those kind of meetings, I don't know about you, but I can't sleep the night before, and I'm constantly thinking about it. And I have to, before the meeting, I have to literally give myself affirmations like, you've got this, you can do this. You've had kids, for God's sake, you're fine. You can do this. This isn't the scariest thing you've ever had to do. Yeah, I have to sort of push myself through it. And I'm fine when I start talking. But it's just that initial bit, when you've gone into the meeting and everyone's there and you're just looking at each other's faces and I don't know.
Yeah.
It just makes
Does your stomach go funny? Because my stomach goes so funny before things like that. It's so weird because we do I don't know about you, but I do presentations all the time as part of my job, right? But before each one, I'm literally dying inside and it doesn't get easier. Why doesn't it get easier?
I have no idea. I honestly thought it would get easier. The more you do it, the easier it gets. But I think maybe because I'm more of an introvert, I don't know. I just think that plays a part in there because I guess naturally I don't want to do things like that. But I try to push myself to do them just to make it easier. But it doesn't seem to be getting easier.
Yeah, but did your presentation go well?
Yes, it went really well. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
So in this episode, we will be talking about one of those taboo, and I say taboo in inverted commas, subject that perhaps we haven't talked about as much growing up in South Asian communities. Perhaps your experiences might be different, but we'll be sharing our experiences today.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to start this episode by asking our listeners, how much do you really know about periods? Really know? How the process works, at what point is your body releasing estrogen and progesterone, that your body goes through different phases that potentially could affect energy levels in each cycle. It's crazy, isn't it? Most women menstruate, but why is it that we don't know more about what happens in our bodies and why do we not talk about it? It's almost forbidden and shameful for us to talk about periods when boys have the attitude of, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. I'm like, hello, the world is dependent on us having a period so that we can procreate.
That's such a good point. Boys make such a joke out of their sort of personal things. And we have to be embarrassed about ours.
Yeah, to be honest, I'll admit, even I didn't know much about periods a couple of months ago. But then obviously when I started all of the readings that I was doing and looking into it, and I was just like, I have to say, man, our bodies are incredible. And if only we could actually understand how magnificent the menstruation process is, we wouldn't stop talking about it.
Yeah, that is such a good point. You're right.
I think as well, obviously I'm not saying go study it in depth and stuff like that. I'm just saying for the sake of younger women, I feel like we should know more and we should be talking about it. So I just wanted to ask you, Zed, what did you learn about periods, or what were you told about periods, if anything, growing up?
So in terms of what I was told, I remember when I was in primary school, there was, I don't know, a lunchtime class, or there was some sort of class where only girls were invited to it. And there was a teacher who explained very briefly what a period was and how to use a sanitary towel. That was it. I honestly do not recall much from that. I just remember that the boys weren't invited to that. And then they just wanted to know what we talked about. And then the girls wouldn't tell them. And I guess at home growing up, we didn't really talk about things like that. And my sisters would probably tell me about things, but it wasn't a normal conversation, if that makes sense. I'll tell you a story actually. So basically in terms of the males in my family, we definitely didn't bring up menstruation with them. I would say we, I meant the girls. The girls definitely didn't bring up menstruation. So when I was in secondary school, it was the month of Ramadan, so everyone was fasting and I was fasting as well. and I just basically mentioned that I've got a tummy ache. And I vividly remember my brother saying to me in private, so we went to the kitchen, and he came after me and he was like, said, you know, when girls have tummy aches, they really don't need to fast. And I was mortified. Like, I could not look in the eye.
Oh my God.
Exactly. He's 4 years older than me. And I was just so embarrassed. And I just quickly muttered, I was like, it's not that kind of tummy ache. And I just sort of shuffled out of the kitchen. But it must have been so awkward for him. But then again, so brave to have that, to sort of try to have that conversation with me, even though I sort of shut it down straight away. But we don't make it easier because we don't talk about it.
No.
And it's something my husband said the other day as well. He said that women make it harder to talk about periods because, again, a few months ago in Ramadan, we were going to a family house, and basically I specifically told him not to ask any of the girls if they were fasting, just in case they were on the period and it might make them embarrassed. And he basically said to me, I shouldn't have said that because I shouldn't have. It shouldn't be embarrassing to talk about your periods. And by assuming that the girls would be embarrassed probably encourages that behavior. So I wasn't helping it. And it's something that I need to be mindful of as well.
That's really interesting, actually. I love that he brought that up because this is just it. We assume that boys don't know anything about periods, and we assume that it's such a shameful thing, but it isn't. It's natural. Not every single girl, but majority of women go through it.
Yeah. And we just make it into this embarrassing thing. And to be honest, the films and movies, and they don't exactly help things. They make jokes out of it, don't they? So if if a lady's grumpy or irritable, then it must be the time of her month. And it's really sad because I consciously try not to be emotional or irritable or anything like that when I'm on my period, because I don't want to sort of go into that. I don't want to be part of that stereotype and feed into it, but you can't help it. But then these movies don't help. And if the women aren't talking about it, the boys are going to base their, I guess, knowledge based on these stupid movies.
Yeah, I think as well, that's a really good point to raise as well about mood assumptions and women, really, because I don't know how you feel about women, about the general stereotype that if a woman is slightly moody or annoyed, it means that she's on a period. For example, like in the office that I worked in previously, I've heard comments being passed about female colleagues. So if a female colleague was slightly annoyed about something, one of the guys would make a comment like, oh, it must be the time of the month. Why is being on your period used as a shaming tool? And I remember even in high school, to be honest, I would hear boys and actually even girls insulting each other using the same phrase, like, oh, you're moody, so you're on your period, basically.
Yeah, it's just horrible because you just make a joke out of it. They don't take it seriously because, like we've already discussed, it's a serious thing. It's a natural thing. It's not something to be made fun of, but it is now a joke. That's literally what it is. If someone's moody, they're irritable, you've got these assumptions that they're on their period. Not all the time that's the case. I mean, I've even heard of it being jokes made of men. And he must be on it, like, as a joke that he's on his time of his month as well. And it's just stupid, isn't it, really, I think?
Yeah. But I think actually I wanted to bring up a really interesting point about, I don't know if you guys you've probably heard about the term hysteria, but I don't know if you guys know much about the medical condition hysteria that used to be like years ago. Hysteria or female madness, they used to call it. Essentially, hysteria comes from the Greek word that means uterus, right? So in ancient civilizations, they believed that hysteria was caused by the uterus being out of place and basically wandering around the body or generally just wonky. And it was considered, like, the uterus was basically considered to be active and animalistic and having a life of its own. So basically they believed that if there was something wrong with a woman, the uterus was basically moving around the body and, like, for example, squashing the lung or squashing the heart or something like that. And actually it was like one of the first recognized mental disorders. So I think up until the early 20th century, if anything was wrong with a woman, it was hysteria. So conditions like we know now as being depression, anxiety, endometriosis, eating disorders, personality disorders, or even just boredom and rebellion, women would be diagnosed with hysteria, just basically because doctors didn't know what was wrong with them.
That's insane. And was this only for women?
Yeah, basically it was a woman. It was termed female madness. So it was basically only women that were being diagnosed with it. And I think only in the early 20th century or whatever, whenever Sigmund Freud came round, he then basically said that actually, no, it's a neurological thing and it's not that the bloody uterus is moving around the body, that things change and that men can actually have it. And then it all changed.
As soon as men have something, it always changes, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I think I wanted to raise this point because I wanted people to realize like how far in the past all of this started. This started in Greek mythology, man. That's like thousands of years ago. And we're still fighting. We're still fighting this thing. Yeah. Like, seriously, come on, man.
Yeah. And there's so many myths and there's so much hearsay about menstruation, like things like if you use a tampon, you lose your virginity. What on earth? Like, seriously, people are actually, that's actually a thing. And I've heard people saying that. It's shocking. I don't even know what to say about when those kind of things are actually believed. You don't even know what to say because the poor child who doesn't know anything about having a period, the menstruation cycle, everything is new to them. Someone tells them, oh, if you use a tampon, you lose your virginity. How scary must that be for that child?
But I think it's also the way we define virginity. Virginity isn't about the hymen breaking. Virginity is something to you, isn't it? Like, you know when you lose it and when you have it. Do you know what I mean? It's not about, oh, you're pushing a tampon in, so your hymen's broken, so you've lost your virginity. That's not what virginity is. And I think we have to understand that. And also, the hymen doesn't break when you push a tampon in. It stretches a little bit and moves out the way, but it doesn't break.
But there's so many other myths as well. Like, I don't know if you've heard this one, not eating food made by someone on their period because it could be contaminated. That to me was quite silly. I mean, of course you shouldn't eat food made by someone who doesn't practice basic hygiene, but it's ridiculous to associate that specifically to someone menstruating because in my opinion, when you're on your period, you wash more than usual purely because some people have heavier periods than others and you just feel really icky. So you just have that need to wash more.
Yeah. I think we have to come away from the idea that period blood is impure or you being on your period is impure. It's not dirty blood. If you look at the scientific thing behind it, that blood is coming from the blood vessel. So if you cut your arm, for example, it's the same blood that's basically coming out of you. And the reason why it changes colors depends on your uterus wall, on the endometrial layer. It's not dirty. Do you know what I mean? It's still your blood that's coming out of you. There was another one actually out of that about the impure thing where girls sleep outside or in a separate room and they're not allowed to be even in the house because they're considered impure. Yeah, visiting places of worship and things like that as well.
Yeah, there's so many, aren't there? And there's one about period cycles, and this is, I don't know if this is a myth or something, but everyone just assumes that everyone's period cycle is the same and it's the same length for every single person, but obviously it's not. You and I know that's very different. Like, for example, exactly when I was pregnant with Xavier, you don't have your period obviously. Once I had Xavier, I was breastfeeding, so if you're exclusively breastfeeding, you don't have your period. So I didn't have my period for several years because pregnant, Xavier, birth, breastfeeding, Zyra pregnant, breastfeeding again. So only recently has my period come back, and it's the last couple of times it's happened, it's gone on for more than 2 weeks. Yeah. And that's a very long time, but that is normal for me at the moment anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, everybody knows with PCOS, I don't have normal cycles at all. And there's many women that face that. It's not. Some people bleed heavier. Some people are lighter. Some people have severe pain. Some people don't. Everyone's cycle is just individual to them, really.
Yeah, you're right. And we just need to normalize that as well. I mean, it's not, obviously, if you think there's something wrong with your cycle and you feel in your gut that there's something wrong, go get it checked out. But don't just assume that everyone's cycle is exactly the same, because it isn't. We all have different periods.
And sort of teach girls as well not to shame other people about it, because I know what it's like being in high school and stuff. Girls would shame other girls about their periods and why they're abnormal.
Yeah.
But actually, we should be educating our girls about things like this to know when they feel something is wrong in their body.
Yeah. Oh, so I just remembered something. You asked me earlier what was the type of conversation about periods as I was growing up. What was it like in your household?
So we as well, I never really talked, like obviously with my dad, I never spoke about my period, right? Because it was awkward and why would I bring it up? I've, again, like you, I had this thing of, oh, it's shameful, you shouldn't talk about it, but actually that's not the case at all. I don't think I really spoke, like I knew my brother knew about it as well, but we didn't really speak openly about being on periods and things like that. I must admit though, although in school and stuff, we learn about periods, I don't feel like I knew enough about my period when I first got my period to be able to deal with the situation and know what to do. And I think I've mentioned that in previous episodes as well about dealing with it. And I think that's why it's so important for me doing this podcast to sort of raise awareness for other mums out there that potentially can have conversations with their daughters about it. And you can't just assume that because they're learning it in school, they know enough about it.
And not just mums, I would say aunties, sisters, even like it could be any, you don't even have to be female, you can be a man and talk about it as well.
Yeah.
Because I think the more we talk about it just generally, the less taboo it will be, and the less awkward it will be, the less embarrassing it will be. I remember at work, Pete, I used to hide like my tampon up my sleeve because I didn't want to take my whole bag to the bathroom because I thought that would just look really weird. So I used to like hide it up my sleeve and go to the toilet. Like, how stupid was that?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But I think, your point about when dads, like we have to normalize the fact that a dad can talk to her daughter about it, and a dad should start educating himself about learning more about periods. With my auntie, what she's done now with her kids, so she's got one boy and one girl, they basically talk openly about it in the house, about their period and stuff. So my auntie is sort of teaching her son how to behave around his sister when she's on her period and she might be feeling a little bit sensitive about certain things. And I think that's important to educate your sons about that as well, because then that grows with them for the rest of their life into, parts when they get married. And how they treat their partners as well.
Yeah, of course, and the friends and anyone basically they get in contact with. Because if you educate them and you tell them to behave in a more sensitive manner, they are less likely to be influenced by what I mentioned earlier, movies and making fun out of people. Or maybe their friends or peers, maybe they can help educate their peers as a result.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yes, so in terms of sanitary products, there are so many. Like we've mentioned tampons and we mentioned sanitary towels, but there's obviously menstrual cups and other products out there as well that can be used. But what was interesting for me is finding out that there are certain countries that introduce free sanitary products. So, for example, Scotland, South Africa, Zambia. These countries are introducing free products for those people that need it. And I think that's amazing. Because it can be really expensive.
Yeah, it can be really, really expensive. And I think I read a fact actually that we're probably spending at least, on average, this is as well, £156 a year on sanitary products alone. And that's also, I guess, based on an average person with an average flow, I would say, not taking into consideration other people and then taking into consideration other things that you need, probably like pain meds and things like that. So it's actually ridiculous if you think about it. And it's not like it's a luxury product that we just buy here and there. It's a necessity for us.
Yeah, you always have to have a stack at home just in case. And you're right, it's monetized so much. Like if you go to the supermarket aisle, it's inundating, isn't it? How many different types there are and different sizes and different brands. And it can be, I think, quite overwhelming. Especially for sort of the younger girls, because I ended up using what my sisters or my mum recommended, and then as I grew older, I started choosing what I want to use because everyone has different choices. But it's weird, isn't it? There's so many options out there. It can be daunting.
Yeah. And I think as well, people don't know because they generally stick with what they were told. That some people just don't go out and explore and figure out that actually something else might be better for me than what I'm actually currently using.
Yeah. And it's really scary because there's, I think, a lack of regulation of what's in these sanitary products. And again, you're putting these, obviously, if it's a tampon, you're putting it in your body.
Yeah.
And it's scary to think that why aren't they doing more research to make sure these are safe
Yeah.
to put inside? Because I'm assuming that some aren't very safe. Obviously, in other countries, I assume maybe in England it will be fine, but if you're listening from a different country, there might not be as much regulation,
Yeah.
if any. And
Yeah.
I know that in some countries they don't even have sanitary products. They have to use like old bits of fabric because they can't afford it. Like there's so much period poverty.
Yeah, period poverty is such a real thing, and it's actually so sad. And when you think about period poverty as well, this is an interesting point I want to raise. Okay, period poverty must be in a less wealthy, maybe developing country, right? But that's not entirely true. There are people in the UK who are actually struggling because they can't afford to put money aside a month, one, to feed their family. But then would you think about sanitary products over food if you can't feed your family? Think about it. There are actual charities, and I know one in Milton Keynes where I live, there's one called Girl Pack, and it's a lady who started it, and she started doing like period packs for schoolgirls who genuinely can't afford to buy sanitary products, or their parents can't afford to buy them sanitary products. So basically, it's a charity that she started to give girls like clean sanitary products that they can use. So
That's amazing. That's such a good cause.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely amazing what she's doing, actually. And,
So close to home as well.
Yeah. And I think that's what the scary thing is. We don't think about it. Yes, of course, there's period poverty all over the world, but actually, look outside, look at your neighbors. It's right there as well.
Yeah, you're right. It is. It's crazy to think that it's happening not just in those poorer countries. Like obviously in certain countries, when girls start their period, they stop going to school and they end up losing out on education yet again. So women aren't educated enough, which makes it harder for them to progress in life, which is really sad. But yeah, going back to that, the Girl Pack, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I've read lots of stories about girls who are having to stop going to school or work just because they can't handle their period, or they don't have the right amount of sanitary products. So they can't go out because they're worried about the blood going everywhere, or it's too painful, or there's something wrong with them and they don't know what is wrong with them. So they just quit and they just stay in a dark room for that time when they're on their period until they're able to go out and do stuff again. It's really sad.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad. But on a positive note, there are certain countries that are offering menstrual leave. So do you want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So I know that Spain is the first country in Europe that's introduced menstrual leave. So if you have like severe period pain, I think you get 3 days of optional medical leave, and then potentially another 2 days if you've got an exceptional case. And I think that's absolutely amazing that Spain's done that. So well done to them. But to be honest, there have been other countries as well that we don't hear about that have done it in the past, or they have some kind of menstrual leave. For example, in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, and Zambia. So they've basically got some kind of menstrual leave as well for women who actually struggle with it.
I think that's something that needs to be pushed out more and more countries. It's amazing that these countries that have offered it, but I'm surprised of the lack of uptake in other countries. You're introducing the gender pay gap and all these other things, but you won't offer women menstrual leave.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, even with the free sanitary products and stuff, so a lot of those countries are developing countries, right? Or so-called developing countries, let's say. But why the heck are we not doing something here in the UK?
Yeah. We just assume that developing countries can't do certain things, that they're really poor, they're not progressive. But that is a very progressive attitude, in my opinion. And you're right. Why don't we do it here? Why don't we offer free sanitary products to people that need it, especially if there are people that need it?
Yeah.
There's so much more that can be done. And it's just a shame that it's a woman's issue and it's not treated with enough importance.
Yeah. So I guess like from this episode, we're not trying to say go shout about your period to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, but just generally, I think we should be talking about it and changing the way we think about menstruation so that it's accepted by society and it becomes less shameful, because it is a norm for women. So why shouldn't it be a norm in society as well? if we really want equality, we need to start acting out, right?
Yeah, agree entirely with that. So thank you so much for listening to this episode of Not Your Typical Sister. We would be really interested in hearing about your stories on whether or not you're having those discussions about periods in your families, or what you might potentially do to change this so-called taboo subject.
Yes, thank you for listening, and we shall speak to you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Not Your Typical Sister.
We would love to hear your thoughts and comments. You can leave us comments and reviews on whichever streaming service you are listening through.
Don't forget to join our tribe on Instagram and Facebook at Not Your Typical Sister.
Speak to you next time.